Okay, so I played a game a little earlier. Forgive me if I'm a little out of it. I'm actually very tired. I played a game a little earlier in the Enterprise, and we had an interaction with an Oland on the enemy team that ultimately, spoiler alert, we killed the Oland. And Oland's player was rather upset about it and made a forum post about it. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to interact with them. They've only made a few posts. I did send a message in the game. I don't know if they're going to see it. So I did want to just kind of make a replay look at it just to explore some options, give some information, and maybe a clanmate or something could pass it over to him, and maybe it'll be helpful. It's made with good intentions. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and look at the match. So first off, I'm in the Enterprise. Enterprise has a very powerful rocket planes. The torpedoes are strong. They're like the Lexington, but they're slow. And the bombs are extremely unreliably weird. So mostly, this is a rocket plane carrier, and as a destroyer, you got to pay a lot of attention to that. This is really like the strongest rocket plane carrier in the game. So this is a really big threat for destroyers. So the first thing that I'm going to do in a CV is go for a scouting run. Typically when I do a scouting run, I'm going to be going over to one of the two flanks, and I might drop a fighter for general spotting information and go for it. And one other rule that I teach in terms of CV play is if there are four destroyers can be very chaotic. There could be torps coming from a lot of different angles. There could be destroyers rolling together. And, if two destroyers run across one of your destroyers, well, then yours is probably dead. And then you start losing DDs, and then it gets crazy. So if I'm in a carrier and it's a multi, like 3 or 4 destroyer game, I already know I need to pay attention to destroyers. That's definitely something I'm going to be looking at. I'm in an Enterprise, so even more so I'm going to be paying attention to the destroyers. That's what's going to be going on. So if I go to the middle, I'm going to spot and then go to a flank. But if I go to an outer flank, then I can scout across the entire team and get some good information. And because there's 4 destroyers, if I trip across a destroyer, I may abort the scouting run to look for a destroyer. You see me here? This is where I'm turning. This is where the fighters dropped. The reason for this is because it's going to spot this flank for as much as up to a minute, or until it gets shot down. And it's going to watch for any destroyers that are coming into the cap. These fighters are going to be circling in this area. So if the aerial detect of a destroyer, comes across here, it's going to be lit until they shoot down the planes. Realistically, a destroyer would have to come all the way out maybe here so that it could avoid aerial detection to try to cut into the cap. So it's a little bit information, it's a little bit cock block, it's a little bit of both. And as we continue, we can see that the enemy destroyer held his AA until I turned off, which is good. So, did get a little pop shot in. We took about 1,300 damage. About 1,300 damage, 1,200 damage, something like that. So, Oland probably got his priority sector in, so that's going to be a good whap on some planes. Maybe, 1,300 damage at this range. It was a priority sector. So at this point, again, because there's 4 destroyers, I know if I come across a DD, I may need to engage it, especially because I'm in the Enterprise. So right off the jump, he did get a priority sector off, so that gave some damage. That's going to be about half a plane kill. That's a pretty, half of the way toward a kill. But one of the things I advise when you're in a destroyer, specifically if there's an enemy CV that's especially capable, one that's capable against destroyers, is instead of starting at full speed, start at half speed. So if we look at the Oland position right now, he's in D, so he's about a little less than 1 grid square away from entering the cap. If we look at the Akazuki held back a little bit, and the Stalingrad and the Akazuki are kind of working together. Ultimately, the enemy planes are over here. And once the Akazuki sees this, then the Akazuki can start to play more aggressively because, well, he'll know if the planes are coming over and have all the time in the world to reposition if that's the case. But when you don't know where the enemy CV is going to go, you play a little conservatively until you have an idea. Like if you first see planes over here, well then maybe the CV's on this side of the map, so you can be more aggressive on this side. If you first see planes over here, then maybe the CV's more interested in this side of the map, you can be more aggressive over there. So there's a lot of stuff you can infer off the initial scouting run, which can give you a lot of information. And if the Oland had, instead of going full speed, gone maybe half speed, instead of being here, maybe been back here, I wouldn't have caught this in my initial scout. So that automatically would have meant that I would have continued my run all the way over to B, all the way over to C, and theoretically, again, if the destroyers had held back, if I did try to commit on a destroyer, I wouldn't be committing on a destroyer alone. I'd be committing on a destroyer that had 1 or 2 other ships to assist. Am I still going to be able to strike or attack? Sure. But if I'm under AA threat from multiple ships that I can see, while I'm hunting for a destroyer that I can't see natively, if they keep their AA off until like maybe it forces an overfly or something, I mean, it's less likely they're at risk. So anyway, we're at this point in the match. Again, I've explained my reasons. I'm going to turn back in. So now we see the Oland. Why? Because the AA is on. And now we're looking for the Oland. So there's a difference here. Oland's AA is not bad. It's not a Holland, but it's not bad. It's, you know, middling, whatever. You know, this already just being on for just a second has almost finished killing a single plane. But with the Enterprise, you have 12. Losing 1 plane, you still have 11. Losing another plane, you still have 10. This is multiple attack runs. If we had 9 planes and we lost 1, and then we lost a second, we're going to shoot, 3 of them are going to leave, and then we turn around and maybe we shoot once and then we're out of planes. Having the Enterprise, we might be able to shoot still a 3rd time if we're able to manage, you know, the incoming damage. So the AA is good, it's valuable, and he might be having defensive fire running, but if you have defensive fire with maybe 4 puffs of flak, I don't know what the Oland has offhand, but I assume it's around 4. 4 puffs of flak is dodgeable. 4 puffs of flak can be dealt with. However, let me go ahead and close that so it doesn't make boop noises. When the defensive fire is maybe merged up with the flak of a Hindi, well, the Hindenburg might throw 5 or 6 puffs of flak. Well, then suddenly that's like 8 or 10, which means you'll have some really nasty surprises in that AA wall. It's more likely you're going to hit something, and since you can't visually identify as easily which ones are the big bads and which ones are the less awfuls, you might, get nailed by a landmine. Anyway, by opening up, we've revealed the Oland, so he's probably going to get about a plane kill off of this, but he's showing himself, he's also showing himself broadside, so this is of extreme concern against rockets as rockets strike broadside. Now we do lose detection. I think he might have cut off his AA or potentially just gotten blocked by the rock. And because the rockets are really slow, we nipped him, but didn't get much. Now, if we look, it's not just a Hindenburg, it's also a Petropavlovsk. So again, if this wasn't full speed, he's back here. First off, we never would have engaged with him in the first place, but second off, if we did, we wouldn't be on the outer edges of a Hinden. We wouldn't be on the outer edges of a Petro. We'd be in to the medium, more successful ranges of AA, and instead of losing 1.5 planes, we'd lose 3 or 4 to get a single attack. Now we might get a second attack off, but we're losing the amount of resources that we're trading for our opportunity to strike is much higher. So this is something that can radically change the choice. Now, is it going to stop a CV player from diving for the Oland? Maybe not. Depends on the CV player. Depends on how good they are as to whether they're going to be able to pull off a good strike or not. But it also depends on the Oland player as to what the Oland's going to offer the CV in terms of what they're going to be able to see and strike into. Because you do have less aerial detection than the cruisers, so we're going to see them, but we're not necessarily going to see you until we get close enough. And the Enterprise does actually need a fair amount of range to get into to interact with the target. It needs something like 3, maybe 3.5 kilometers. Maybe a little less if you do a hard turn, but maybe we'll probably see that later in the video. So we've now taken 2 planes and looks like probably about 3 planes. Yeah, so 3 planes lost. We get to take a shot. Again, we're still on the outer edges of the Petro and outer edges of the Hindi. Oland's AA is not a slouch. We're about to lose a 4th plane, but because we're not closer, we're not taking more, these 3 planes still exist. If we were just a little bit further back, these would already be dead. We got our second strike, and our second strike did a fair amount of damage. So we've taken 4,000 off of an Oland, but instead of trading 6 planes for this, we've traded 3. So that's already a problem. Now here, we can hard cut this. We can slam on the brakes and try to wrench the reticle around and see if it takes 3 seconds to go from point A to point B, we might need 3 to 3.5 kilometers to come in on this. The Enterprise is special. It has some of the older rocket plane mechanics, which means you can start your attack run, slam on the brakes, hard turn, and catch a side in a way that other US planes cannot. Also, because it takes time from when you start your attack to when you wrench around to get that reticle on, you bleed the distance that it takes for you to run up on the target. So we do see a fair amount of side here, but he is going to turn in, which is going to minimize it. Still, we might get some decent damage. No, turns out we only got 600. So a lot of mitigation there. Looks like 7 planes are coming home. 3 from the first strike, 3 from the second, and then 1 from the third. So we ended up losing 5 planes there, which it's significant, but at the same time, the Enterprise, because it is so rocket focused, it regens planes every 44 seconds, 45 seconds, which that means that's what? Almost 4 minutes? Because it's 1.5 minutes for 2, so that'd be 3 minutes, and then 3:45. So in almost 4 minutes, those 5 planes are going to be back. That would have been much different if instead it was like 6 to 7. You know, that starts pushing it out to maybe 4, 5.5, 6 minutes. Is it a big deal? But it's going to matter in the interactions that we have when we follow up. So because we've started on the Oland, because we know that he's away from here, and he's been liberal with his AA and spotting, I'm going to stay on the Oland, because we already talked about 4DD games. If we can reduce the amount of chaos, the amount of crazy, that's going to assist the team. So I'm going to go back to this Oland, which was spotted by, I guess, Stalin radar. Once again, he's turning in, which is good. Takes some bad RNG, takes 2,600. Now, granted, 2,600 is rough. Not going to say it isn't. The Enterprise rocket planes are extremely dangerous. But if I get a broadside hit, like a good broadside hit, this is easily 6,000 to 8,000. So I know it's not a lot of mitigation, but it is mitigation. Secondly, something else to point out. The Oland pulled away from the Stalingrad radar, which perfectly makes sense. I get it. But right now there's a Hindi and a Petro, and the Petro is blocked by a rock. So he doesn't have the assistance of the Petropavlovsk right now. Petro's AA is not terrible. In fact, it might have defensive fire for all you know. CV could give a fighter, that would be good, but I don't believe the CV is paying attention to this instance. So if instead of the Oland coming down this way and running out, if the Oland had instead run even just to the rock, it would have been safe from the Petro radar. Gearing might have taken some pot shots or something, maybe the Tirpitz does. But even being here, have some cover from the Petro, or frankly, the fact that the CV engaged the Oland so early, so fast, and took some serious hits, Oland still has some healing. It's got 3, maybe 4 heal charges, could regen, I don't know, maybe back up to here or so. Just break off from A for a little bit. Let the cruisers kind of get in position, establish yourself at the cap before you start to move in and take that more aggressive position. Instead, when you take the riskier shot of, I'm going to go now. I'm going to take the cap now. I'm going to push this now. You don't necessarily have the support. I mean, the Petro could move in, supposedly, if he knows everything about what's going on and if that's a good choice. But he's staying back on the rock. And because of the way the AA is, he's not going to be able to assist. Hindenburg has very low AA ranges at 5.2, which is lower than normal. And obviously, he's too far away. So, I mean, right now you got the CV on top of you. If you kind of pull back for a sec, all right, Oland is backed up. I don't really have a good shot on this. It's on me as a CV to either force the issue and take the plane loss that's going to come with it, or look for targets that are more readily available, more approachable. So, just to recap, came down and instead of staying on the rock where the Petro can help, came out and blocked himself from the Petro's AA. Or just not going for the cap right off. Take a chill pill, relax. Give yourself a 30-second stretch to just kind of hang out back here and just sort of see what's going on. I think getting in here and getting radar might have been a bit of a surprise, because I think the enemy CV came over and lit this flag first instead of over here, and the Stalin radar might have been a shock. So now we're starting to take a little Petro AA, but it is still long range. Even still, just in this amount of time, we're about to lose, basically 2 planes for that. And the other thing is, the Oland having the AA on, having your AA on means you're going to get kills. Yeah, and we did lose the second plane. Having your AA on means you're going to get kills. Okay, but the question is the kill on the plane worth more than giving the CV less information? So let's say instead, when I was pulling back, and we got to maybe that 3.2, whatever range, if the AA went off, I lose sight of the Oland. My team loses sight of the Oland. How he moves, how he alters, how he decides to bow in or not, if he decides to try and take a hard turn or something, all that's information I don't have until I re-engage. And there is something in for destroyer played called jousting. Now granted, there's an Akazuki here, there's a Stalin, there's a Gearing, there's a Tirpitz, there's a lot of stuff over here which is kind of a problem, but in jousting you're effectively trying to get under the guns of the rocket planes. If I'm not going to see you until like 3 kilometers, and then it takes about half a second for the ship to render because of server delay, then I'm actually going to be like 2.5 or 2.3 or something, and there's no way that I can stop and shoot in time. I overfly. But if you were jousting, then it's going to pull you deeper into the cap, closer to the enemy guns, further away from support. So it's like, this is a real tough position. You're trying to force an issue and you don't necessarily have the tools to be able to do that. You don't have the teamwork to be able to do it. I mean, really, if you wanted to bury yourself in here, then, if this is your broadside, the only actual way I have in is to come across the Petro and then come in from that angle. So I'm going to lose planes for that, but I mean, if you're just stuck sitting there broadside, you're going to get hurt. Whereas if you can, like, maybe, I don't know, this is a tough play. I don't see a way in which you're going to just take this cap. You're in a situation where you just don't have the ability to bully through it with what you've got. So, angled takes damage. That's another 7 hit, so significant. And engine's down, potentially some other stuff's knocked out. I don't know if he's damage conned or not, but pointing in the direction of the enemy, you're getting closer to the Akazuki, getting closer to the Gearing, closer to the Stalin. You don't have rock cover because you went open, probably to get away from the Stalin radar. I mean, it's just getting back, recouping, reassessing the situation, making cleaner decisions. Probably would have served you well. I only got the 1 plane though. I think I am going to try to make the shot just because I'm here. Which, it actually connected fairly well. 4 rockets, not a joke. It's about another 2K. So the Oland doesn't have the aerial pressure at the moment. So you can turn. Again, you got a Petro and a Hindi that are back here. They want to help, but they're braced behind a rock, which is a little silly. I mean, the Tirpitz probably just isn't going to bingo them from way the hell out here. The range isn't up. Venezia might take some chunks of flesh, but the Petro locked up on the island, I think they're just not sure what they're doing on this flank yet. They don't have a battleship to hard push, so they're not sure what's going on. And there is an Akazuki out here, so maybe they're scared to push into a DD. If they're not moving, like, to an extent, in a non-CV game, you might get called, you might get checked by radar, you might get checked by hydro, if you're, I don't know, behind an island or something. You might get checked by the enemy DD, but you can't be checked by planes if they don't exist. When you can be checked by planes, it's one of those risk factors, it's like, is there a tornado? Is it going to hail out? I don't know. It's just something you got to factor in. And right now, planes are on top of you, planes are dealing with you. Now it's just not the time to push. All right, so we're going to go back. Oland is retreating, which is good. It's falling back. But again, this Petro is locked behind the island. Hindi is too far away, so he's still isolated. And you gave me free information. You went ahead and popped your AA. You see I'm coming. You know I'm going to be on top of you. Now, you might think, Well, if I use my AA now, there's going to be more chances for me to hit flak. First off, I'm a super unit come CV. I do eat flak. It does happen. I mean, playing this game, I ate all kinds of flak because my head was pretty rough today. But if you've only got like 4 flak puffs, it's pretty dodgeable. You know, there's not really a walling effect to that. It's pretty capable of being evaded. So if I'm not eating flak, then this additional damage like eats maybe half a plane, but it tells me exactly where you are, exactly what you're doing, and exactly what I need to do in terms of approaching you. You do want to use the lesser aerial detection to your benefit. It's okay to use your AA, but turn it on and then turn it off. Turn it on and then turn it off. You choose when you are able to use that larger detection. Just like when you're fighting, you know, if you're going to shoot shells at something, granted you're lit for 20 seconds, but you're going to choose, when do I want to shoot and light myself because I feel it's the right time to shoot? And when do I hold my fire because it's just not the right time to shoot? The AA is a much tighter interaction with that, because when you use your AA, you stay lit for 2 seconds. But it's something you got to factor in. So once again, he's angled. However, RNG in our favor again, 2600. And because we can hard turn, we can bleed some speed. And this is probably the kill? No. It's damage, but the gearing over here was able to take shots. And there was a comment in chat that he made because he was frustrated that I'm not going to show. So there's just a few things about this to really point out. Was one, if you just entered the battle at half speed for a little bit till you saw what are the planes doing, what's going on, do I feel comfortable moving up, where are my team positions going, how can I assist them? Is it screening for the Akazuki over here? Is it not threatening the cap? Is it trying to take the cap because they're not? You know, waiting for their CV maybe to come over and kind of get more information before you decide to commit. You know, there's nothing wrong with taking 30 seconds to just kind of assess the situation, especially if you're not under threat. But coming in, forcing the issue did not work out. And forcing the issue in a way where your team was not even able to assist you without, you know, rushing in, basically, like abandoning an island position, forcing himself onto the cap, and then potentially being stuck in a crossfire as a result of it, it was just untenable. It wasn't a thing that would work. Now I realize, you know, there's a common refrain, well, the CV player just tells you, you need to go hide behind your team, you can't have fun, you can't do anything. But I want to point out, this is 4 minutes into the game. I have not once been to Bravo. I have not once been to Charlie. Granted, because I was picking on the Oland, my apologies, but it means that the Kagero has been able to do whatever it was going to do. The Kaba was going to be able to do whatever it was going to do. The CV can only be on one section of the map at a time, and that's something that you absolutely have to look at. The more familiar you are with what a CV can do or what a CV is going to see, the more likely you can see when, he's going to identify this. You can make a move. You can start to push A. You can start to cap it, because this is only like 60 seconds. So flight over here probably takes about 30 to 40. And if I've already started working on something, it's likely that I feel it's a priority, so I might go back. In which case, that's a great time to start capping. If the surface radar isn't on the ground, if the DDs don't pressure the cap, you take it, you're good. You don't have to force through. You just take it and you back up, and then you hang back with your team, defend the cap, do what you do, hold the flank. But yeah, so this probably went on a lot longer than I expected it to. I was really just looking to kind of hit a specific situation, short interaction, but I wanted to highlight the points along the different way as to what options there were, you know, the things that worked, the things that didn't. And yeah, so hopefully this was helpful. Again, I don't know if I'm going to experience the gentleman that I interacted with, because he doesn't post on the forums very much, and for all I know, he might have blocked me. I don't know. So maybe a clanmate or somebody else that knows him can pass this on, and I hope it helps. It's made with good intentions anyway. So that's going to be it.